Hey, welcome to SI Now. It is Friday, January 13th, and I'm Maggie Gray. So happy to have you with us. Coming up, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, talks about his new movie, and he looks back at his career in the WWE. Plus, we'll talk to the man who nicknamed himself He Hate Me, Rod Smart of the short-lived XFL. But we'll start with the NFL. And for that, let's say hello to Super Bowl champion Chris Canty and our own Ryan Aselta. Hey, guys. Happy Friday.
All right, Maggie, divisional weekend in the NFL playoffs is upon us. Chris, we're going to break down those four matchups in just a bit, but let's start with the news out of Southern California. Yesterday, we now have two football teams in Los Angeles. Chris, what do you think? Can the Chargers be a win for the NFL in Los Angeles?
Well, listen, it's going to be a tough marketplace to have two franchises in Los Angeles, and you got to be able to put a winning product on the field. The Rams took steps towards doing that by hiring offensive coordinator Shawn McVay from the Washington Redskins. But if you look at the San Diego Chargers, now the Los Angeles Chargers, I mean, you saw their logo. It looks like they stole the Dodgers logo
come on.
and the Tampa Bay Lightning logo, and they put it together.
You got to be a little more creative than that, you know?
So, I know. So it's off to a little bit of a rocky start with the logo part of it, but it seems like the biggest question mark that I had for that franchise relocating was who was going to take the head coaching position, who was GM Tom Telesco going to find amidst all of the question marks in terms of the franchise, whether we're staying in San Diego or moving to LA. It seems like they're starting to come closer to the answer to that question with offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn from the Buffalo Bills. So we'll see how that shakes out. We'll see how that gets finalized over the weekend.
Let's talk about the fan base. Can they sustain two teams? They went from 0 to 2. In a year here. Yeah. The Chargers are going to play in a soccer stadium for a little while until they move into the Rams Stadium in Inglewood. Is there enough interest? Because when you hear about L.A., there's really more Raiders fans than anything else in that market.
There are a lot of Raiders fans in Southern California, but make no mistake about it, people love football. And if you have an opportunity to go watch a winning product, and the Chargers do have that opportunity because they have a stability at the quarterback position in Phillip Rivers. If you can put a winning product on the field, people will come, people will pay to see that. And I think the Chargers have that opportunity. They've got talent on both sides of the ball, so they just need somebody to oversee it and get it all come together.
See how the post-Phillip Rivers era when they get to that
You're trying to retire Phillip Rivers already?
36 years old.
You're trying to retire?
He's not going to be there forever,
Are we saying
Chris?
that about Tom Brady? He's 38.
Tom wears those special
We're not
pajamas,
about
though.
Tom.
You know, that makes him play so well so late in his career. All right, let's move on to the playoffs. And speaking of Tom Brady, let's get to the AFC playoffs. And we begin on first down with probably not the best matchup of the weekend. It is the Patriots hosting the Houston Texans up there in New England, and really looking like a mismatch, Chris. 15-point favorites in this game, the New England Patriots. Is there any way the Texans can keep this game close?
Well, they're going to have to be able to steal possessions, but that's a big if they can keep this game close. I have a hard time seeing Bill O'Brien being able to out-scheme his mentor, Bill Belichick. You look at personnel on both sides of the ball, all three phases of the game, offense, defense, and special teams. It looks like a mismatch on paper. You see how the New England Patriots were executing coming into the postseason. If you look back at their regular season matchup in Week 3, even without Tom Brady, it was a landslide, 27-0 win. I really see a hard time, the Texans having a hard time being able to take out the New England Patriots.
Brock Osweiler, 24-41 in that first meeting with a pick. I kind of see more trouble ahead for him as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to second down. And that was a mismatch. We got a good ball game, though, to start off the weekend. It's going to be between Julio Jones, Richard Sherman, Falcons, and Seahawks, 4:35 Eastern. And this is a rematch from Week 6. Classic offense versus defense here, Chris. Can Seattle slow down Atlanta's passing game? And more specifically, can Richard Sherman contain Julio Jones?
I think the bigger question is Julio Jones going to get some get back for that last late no-call pass interference in the regular season matchup?
You're finally admitting that was a no-call pass.
It was a question.
It took me 12 weeks to get you to admit that.
It was a questionable call. Questionable call. But I will say this. The Atlanta Falcons, one of the most high-powered offenses in the National Football League. They scored 540 points in the regular season. That's tops in the league. I mean, Matt Ryan in that dome, on that turf, they're going to play fast. Taylor Gabriel, Julio Jones, Tevin Coleman, Devontae Freeman in the backfield, both of those guys being dynamic runners as well as receivers. I see a hard time, the Seahawks having a hard time being able to match up with all of those different weapons, especially with Earl Thomas out of the lineup.
Yeah, and they really mix it up. Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, pretty interesting. They combined for 1,600 yards rushing and 900 yards receiving. If that was one back, That's quite the year out of the running back
exactly.
position.
That guy is an MVP candidate.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go to third down here. Steelers Big 3 or KC's Big D. Let's shift to the Sunday 1 o'clock Eastern game. The Chiefs are going to host the Steelers. The Pittsburgh blew out the Chiefs earlier this season in Week 3. Ben Roethlisberger threw for 5 touchdowns in that game. Chris, how does Kansas City slow down the Big 3? Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Big Ben.
Well, I think it has to be a ball control style of offense. And the Kansas City Chiefs, Alex Smith, they're masters at being able to do that. And then being able to do what Kansas City is the best at in the National Football League on defense, which is steal possessions and taking the ball away. Kansas City, #1 in turnovers this season, 33 takeaways this year.
Kind of surprised looking at the stats. 24th in total defense, Kansas City, and they're 15th against the run. That could be a big problem. We saw a lot of those issues come up in the first meeting of the year between these two. Is this just really maybe a bad matchup for Kansas City with Pittsburgh coming to town?
Well, Kansas City is not this steel curtain defense, right? Kansas City is more of a bend but don't break defense. They're able to steal possessions, and then they tighten up in the red zone. They understand who they are as a defense. They have an identity, and they're able to rise to the occasion when they need to. They've got playmakers all over the field, all 3 levels of that defense. So I think they're going to have to lean on that, especially when you're going up against that Pittsburgh Steelers offense.
All right, should be a good one. And we'll cap things off on 4th down with the grand finale of the weekend. It's in Big D on Sunday afternoon. Cowboys are going to host the Packers. And let's start with Green Bay. Hottest team in the league, hottest quarterback in the league, and Aaron Rodgers. He's been ridiculous on this stretch they're on right now. What's the recipe for success for the Green Bay Packers going into Dallas?
Well, you mentioned it. Aaron Rodgers has been ridiculous. He's playing like it's a video game out there. 19 touchdowns and no interceptions over the last 7 games. I think it's going to come down to the Dallas Cowboys being able to make this team one-dimensional. What I mean by that is the Cowboys offensively have got to get out to a fast start. They've got to take the lead in this game, and then they've got to be able to lean on that offensive line, Ezekiel Elliott in that running game, and again, keep Aaron Rodgers on the sideline, because really that's the only defense that can stop him is if he's not on the field. If Aaron Rodgers has the opportunity to have balance on the offensive side of the ball, it spells trouble for the Cowboys.
Elliott, well over 100 yards in the first meeting, which was a Cowboys win. A lot different pressure, though, in this game. The spotlight, playoffs, this team's the top seed, 13-3 on the season. How do you see Dak and Zeke, stepping into the spotlight of the NFL playoffs?
I think it'll be more of an issue for Dak than it will for Zeke, because Zeke is a running back, right? Running the football is one of the most natural things, one of the most natural positions in the National Football League, especially with that offensive line. They're going to open up holes. He's going to make defenders miss. He's going to do what he does. But I think Dak has got to understand the playoffs and understand situational football. He's been great at that in the regular season, but it takes another step up when you get into the postseason. Things move just a hair quicker. The Dallas Cowboys don't turn the football over. That's been a part of their formula for success. They can't afford any turnovers from their young gunslinger, Dak Prescott, this weekend.
Great way to wrap up the weekend. NFL salivating. You got to see the ratings coming out of this game, 4:35 on Sunday. They may have been down throughout the year. They're going to be up on
for that
Sunday afternoon.
They'll be all the way up for that
Great weekend all around. Divisional weekend. We'll be watching. We know you will. Maggie, let's send it back to you.
Thank you, guys. Just a note on the Cowboys-Packers game. Wide receiver Jordy Nelson has been ruled out for Sunday's action. While we settle in for another weekend of playoff football, fans may not be the only ones who are hoping for a few close games. Here is our own John Wertheim with more.
Never mind the Cowboys or the Patriots or those underrated Atlanta Falcons. You know who could really use a strong showing this coming weekend? The NFL. When they write the league's history one day, this will not go down as a banner season. Amid the usual uneasiness about head injuries and physical punishment, this season could be best summed up in 3 letters. M-E-H. Meh. The much-hyped return of NFL football in Los Angeles? Meh. The Rams finished only 4-12 and fired their coach. The season of reigning MVP Cam Newton? Meh. And the Panthers didn't even make the postseason. Chip Kelly in San Francisco? Don't even get us started. The TV ratings, the league's lifeblood, reflected all this meh. If the death spiral ended after the election, viewership was still down significantly this season. And then came last weekend's first-round game. Meh would be generous. The winners beat the losers by a combined score of 121-35. The closest game was decided by 13 points. All leagues, all teams, all businesses go through periods of decline. But at some point, slumps harden into something more severe. We'll see if pro football can snap out of it now. There are plenty of storylines this weekend: Prescott versus Rodgers, Brady on a week's rest, the prospect of a Super Bowl team playing in their home stadium. But right now, like the 8 remaining teams, the most powerful league in all of sports could sure use a win.
WWE superstar Shawn Michaels knows his place in history. The man nicknamed the Heartbreak Kid is not only in the WWE Hall of Fame, he's revered as one of the most popular and influential wrestlers of all time. Michaels has left the ring, and he found a new love: acting. Shawn Michaels stopped by our studio yesterday. Shawn, the resurrection of Gavin Stone. Now, we're not used to seeing you on the big screen. You played Doug in this movie. Why'd you want to get involved in this project?
Well, one, I guess, because the director, Dallas Jenkins, he knew of my story. He felt there was clearly a similarity between Doug's story and my real life story. It's something I'd always been interested in, but you want to do something that you feel, certainly for me, my first one, that I don't know, that's not too much of a stretch, but is deep enough that will challenge you. And this was all of that. And again, it was a phenomenal script. It was a feel-good story. And again, it was in an environment that I felt that I would be really comfortable in.
What do we see on screen? Do we see Shawn Michaels as we knew him in the ring, now acting on the big screen?
Well, I hope not, because if that's the case, I didn't do a very good job. And so, but that's the thing. I don't. It's my first time. I would in no way, shape, or form would claim to know all the ins and outs of acting, and that's also the same reason I wanted to do it. It was challenging, and again, it was a role that doesn't have anything to do with pulling your shirt off, getting in fights, and action adventure, that type of stuff. It had some real depth to it, and those are the types of things. Honestly, the real me sort of likes that. Again, something that challenges you a little more emotionally and intimately, and that's what this role did. And so, again, I'll let all the folks that see it judge whether I've done a decent job, because the point is for you not to see Shawn Michaels, but for you to see Doug.
I think you're being really humble here, Shawn. I think you did a great job. I think you couldn't even tell that this was your first on-screen acting gig in this way. I mean, I know that you have a lot of experience, obviously, playing a role.
Well, yeah, certainly, yes. I mean, let's be honest, I hope I'm not disclosing anything, but wrestling has certainly got some acting in it. And so in that aspect, I was very comfortable with it. But again, I've played sort of one guy for many years. And honestly, even the Heartbreak Kid character was, it was a lot of aspects of me. And then you get to a point to where you've got yourself established to where it's almost sort of impossible to make mistakes. And even when you do, you're so comfortable in your skin that it doesn't play badly, if that makes any sense. And this is, again, acting in film is very different, because if it sticks out like a sore thumb, everybody notices.
It's interesting you said you feel like you've kind of played the same role, because I think from the viewer standpoint, it seems like two very distinct and sort of separate careers of Shawn Michaels. We had you in the 90s, and just how you were as Heartbreak Kid. And then when you came back in the 2000s, you personally, you were different. How do you connect with the audience? It's so important to do that in wrestling. How did you connect with the audience as the first iteration of Shawn Michaels? And then how did you find them again when you came back?
Well, honestly, that's sort of the thing, is that's why I tell everybody I wasn't really acting that much. So much of that was a lot of me. It was my inner self expressing myself in the ring. I like to think that's what worked for me. Again, only being 190 pounds and making it in a very big man's line of work, is because I think people sensed the genuineness and the honesty of again, the character, but it was not really that far. And honestly, the arc of the character mirrors the arc of my life, because, and again, that's one of those things where, again, that's where I get a little even more spiritual than I am in real life. It's that, my goodness, that's hard to do in the pro wrestling business. And all of mine sort of just fell into a place where it turns out to be such a good story that you go, somebody had to write that, but nobody did. It was just my real life sort of on screen, and it, thank the good Lord, worked out well and has a happy ending.
Yeah.
But none of that was by design, and to be perfectly honest, that comes from a place, far greater than me.
Yeah, you've been very honest about your story and the issues that you had with alcohol and with drugs. I mean, you go back and think about that time. If you do go back and think about that time, was there a lowest moment for you, and how'd you get past it?
Well, I guess on one hand you go, well, there were a lot of low moments, but honestly, for me, it was the realization, again, having absolutely nothing to do with wrestling, publicity, any of that kind of stuff, a very quiet, intimate moment in our home of me recognizing that I was failing as a husband and a father, and it broke my heart. Again, it doesn't matter how much you do worldly or I don't know. It's again
the adoration.
Very cool to be again to hear things like he's a legend. He's just, and it is very unbelievably flattering, and I'm so blessed to experience it. But if I am a failure as a husband, as a father, again, we were just talking earlier, about your tennis career, and one of the things in my mind, all the commitment and what you might miss out on, and to me, that's why I retired. One thing, no matter how great you are, you cannot replace is time. I retired because I didn't want to lose any more time with my children, and I wanted to go back home and help my wife raise them and be a part of their life. And again, all the greatness in the world, doesn't matter what you do, you can't replace that or get it back.
I hope this doesn't come off sounding just like morbid curiosity, but were you ever in the ring drunk or high?
Yeah.
How did you hide that? How did you pull that off?
Well, because I wouldn't think ever like 3 sheets to the wind. But again, one of the things, and again, think it worked for me, and the good Lord had his hand on me. I was so, and I say this with all humility, I was so naturally gifted. I can do that stuff blindfolded and standing on one leg. I was put on this earth at that time in my life to do that stuff. I mean, there is just absolutely nothing more comfortable or natural to me than being a pro wrestler. As silly as that sounds,
No,
but I
at all.
thoroughly know for a fact that I was built to do that for that time in my life. And so again, not to glorify that by any stretch, but again, I mean, it was just, I could do it again. I mean, that's why people get, you're 51, you're in pretty good shape, why don't you come back? And one, I don't want to, but could I? Sure, I could, and I think I could probably compete with, quite, and again, I mean, in a nice way, I think I could compete with any young guy there.
What a fascinating subject. We'll air part 2 of my interview with Shawn Michaels on Monday. Turning now to another of Vince McMahon's creations. It was football's Shooting Star, a league that promised to dazzle us, burn brightly and briefly. A new 30 for 30 documentary called This Was the XFL looks with fresh eyes on the experiment that lasted only 1 season. The lasting image from the league for many people was the football player who nicknamed himself He Hate Me. That man, Rod Smart, is here along with the director of the film, Charlie Ebersol. Congratulations on this great film. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You're probably get asked this quite a bit. How'd you come up with He Hate Me?
Well, I am a marketing genius.
Did you know that at the
Or
time?
so says Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
No, I just, I'm very competitive. So my thing was anytime I go against my opponent, he's going to hate me because I'm going to kick his butt. Plain and simple.
Okay, so that's He Hate Me. There were some other great nicknames, though, who you were playing alongside with. What are some of your other favorite nicknames? And Charlie, I'll ask you the same thing.
Well, I had a couple guys did He Hate Me too and whatever, You had
spin-offs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sequels.
So, it showed my leadership skills as well. But, I can't remember a lot of other ones, but I remember a few on my team in Las Vegas, Chuck Wagon and
Right.
and
Chuck
Toro
Wagon.
and But, you know, a lot of that stuff I really can't remember.
Charlie,
But-
what were some of your favorite nicknames from the
Well, my
XFL?
favorite story of the whole thing is Vince gets, like a couple hours before the game, Vince gets handed a list of the nicknames for the first game. And he goes, yeah, this is fine, and hands it back. And someone goes, did you read the list? And he goes, yeah, it's fine. He goes, can you name all the names? Why? What's wrong? Well, number 50 whatever is Teabagger. And they were an hour and a half away from having somebody in a radio call say something along the lines of, and that was a 7-yard gain by Teabagger. And
Yeah, clearly not someone who may have been thinking about political office after their football playing days were over, calling themselves
well, actually,
that.
maybe.
Although in this
I
day
think
and age,
now with that name,
they'd
you
be
could probably get
perfect.
elected president.
you'd have a good shot, maybe at VP. But Charlie, of course, your father, Dick Ebersol, longtime television executive for NBC and really television genius, teamed up with Vince McMahon to bring us all the XFL. Yet we see in the movie, very shortly before the launch, one of your father's kind of, I don't want to say assistants, but someone who worked with him, a colleague, turns to him after a meeting with Vince McMahon and says, Vince doesn't have it. Nobody still knew what the XFL was at that moment. What was the league supposed to be?
Well, in reality, the league was supposed to be 10% less than the NFL. So if you have college football here, and then you have Arena League and Canadian Football League, and more, XFL was going to be here and the NFL was going to be here. They never expected to go out and be the NFL. I think the caveat was, as good as my dad and Vince are at creating television shows and having huge hits and storytelling, neither of them were professional athletes and recognized that you probably need more than 28 days of practice to put a league on. And I think that really handicapped them. The reason I wanted to do the film, though, was to tell the story of these two guys, because over the course of 30 years, they worked together on Saturday Night Main Event and created that, but they created massive hits. And then this one thing, which obviously most people think of as a failure, I thought defined their relationship even more than it defined their careers.
Yeah, it is fascinating between these two geniuses in television and entertainment. But Rod, you played in this league. They were expecting it to be 10% less than the NFL. It obviously didn't become that. Did you ever feel like, before you got to the Carolina Panthers and you had your own NFL career, did you feel like the NFL players looked at you guys in a mocking way? Perhaps you guys were a little bit of a sideshow?
No, actually, first team I went to coming from the XFL was the Philadelphia Eagles. And they were warm and, you know, they invited me into their brotherhood. So, you know, just being another football player coming from a different league, you know, the way the guys embraced me, it was all love.
Is there a XFL fraternity that exists now?
Well, I still stay in touch with a lot of the guys that were on the team with me. So we have our little circle.
Okay. Charlie, did the NFL ever feel threatened by the XFL at all?
I don't think they felt threatened. Jerry Jones is in the film, and I don't think the league felt threatened. What I think the league felt was that they had an opportunity. Because if the XFL had worked, they had a D league. They had a minor league, which the NFL is the only professional sports that doesn't have it. And I think that, as Jerry talks about in the film, that this was something that they knew they needed and they wanted. So I don't know that they liked the packaging. I think that scared them a little bit. At the same time, I think the other networks were extraordinarily threatened by it, because you think about the business of football. In 1998, when NBC left the NFL, Fox lost close to $150 million a year on the NFL rights. And in failure, the XFL only cost NBC $37 million. So the idea that if it had worked, all the other leagues would be stuck paying these ludicrous fees to the NFL, and NBC would have owned their own league. That I think, and you see it in the press coverage of the XFL, there was this very profound push against the league by the media.
You know, it's so funny, though. You say that Jerry Jones really feels or felt or maybe feels like the NFL needs a developmental league. Could that happen right now?
It is happening.
There is a league now that's going to be starting.
Tom Brady's agent is working on doing it right now. I don't think it'll work if the NFL is not really embracing it. I think the real issue is that the NFLPA, it's a hard pitch.
What about if social media and fantasy football had been as big in 2000 and 2001 as it is now, do you think the XFL would have had a better shot?
I think if the first game of the XFL had been the game that took place in Orlando instead of the game that took place in the Vegas, the XFL would still exist. I think that you showed 54 million people one really good player and then a bunch of guys who weren't practiced, who were somewhat out of shape, And it cost him because New York's total offense for the game was like 19 yards. Like it was crazy. Meanwhile, the Orlando game was 34-37. So I think that a lot of bad luck really contributed to it. I think all the packaging was there, but the first two times anyone saw the league, it was really bad play. And then after that, I think the games were good, but you could never get the audience to show back up.
Yeah, it's funny in the film you say you had about a half to get them. One half of football to get the audience in because everyone tuned in. Rod, if there's one moment or maybe a story that really illustrates what it was like to play in the XFL, what was it?
What it was like to play in the XFL? Well, I'm going to just give you a little rundown of my experience because, I was coming out of college somewhat. And I say somewhat because I had a small stint of the Chargers before I got to the XFL, which I don't count because I didn't play a full season. So, that doesn't count. But with the XFL, just imagine yourself being early 20s, single, Las Vegas, Nevada, Sin City.
You're painting a pretty good picture here.
And you're making $5,000 a week. You don't make this in college. You're hustling and scuffling for food, in college and for whatever you can get. But in Vegas, Sin City, single, money in my pocket, young male, young athlete, I was winning from day one.
Yeah, I would say that. Bottom line, it was good to be He Hate Me.
Yeah.
Back
That just
you were
put the
there.
icing on the cake.
And that was the icing on the cake. Well, congratulations again on the film.
you.
Great to see you, Mr. XFL. Still, people to this day remember you from that and also your NFL career, Charlie. Congratulations on the film.
Thank
Really
you
a good
very
one,
much.
of course. The film, it's going to be premiering on ESPN February 2nd. And while you look forward to that, here's a look at what's on tap for this weekend. It's time for SI Now's Weekend Drive presented by Toyota. Let's go places. Our first stop takes us to Foxborough for some NFL divisional round action, and there is history on the line for Tom Brady. A win for number 12 means he'd be playing in his 6th consecutive conference championship game, which would be an NFL record. But we don't expect Brady to be focused on anything but the Texans.
There's a lot of focus and attention, and you're putting a lot of concentration into each play because you're not promised next week, so we have to go earn that. And our guys have been focused on that. Coach talked a lot about that, and it's going to be a big test for offense.
The Pats shut out the Texans earlier this season. However, Jacoby Brissett was under center while Brady was under suspension. Next, we travel over the Atlantic for the Northwest Derby, one of soccer's most historic rivalries. Liverpool and Manchester United will square off at Old Trafford, and the Reds manager Jurgen Klopp is well aware of how important a win would be against the Red Devils.
It's a very, very important game. I know this. I know about history, and I like these special stories around games. And I know we only can get 3 points, or they unfortunately can get 3 points, or we draw, whatever, and that can happen. But it's I think the whole world will watch this game.
Liverpool could be in for a wild one. Man U is currently riding a scorching 9-game win streak. Lastly, we head back stateside to wrap up with the NFL's most anticipated matchup, the Packers and the Cowboys. These two teams have a history that goes back generations, but it appears Des Bryant is still bitter about a no-catch call from 2014.
Still to this day, before we even knew we was going to play the Packers, it's still to this day. They'd be like, it's January, blah, 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 2017, 3:29 p.m., and just want the world to know that Des Bryant still caught it, and be funny. So, it's... What's up? You did catch it, right? Yeah, of course.
Attacking the secondary could be the best bet for Dallas. The Packers rank 31st, nearly dead last in passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. And that's what's in store for this weekend. And that will do it for this Friday episode of SI Now. We'll see you back here on Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern with more from the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. Until then, stick with SI.com for all the latest news, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the football. We'll see you Monday.